Welcome back to the This Is Reno Podcast, videocast, and radio show. I am Bob Conrad.
And I'm Kristen Hackbarth. We broadcast on KWNK Community Radio at 97.7 FM in Reno and on all the podcast apps.
And we are back recording today, Monday, July 27th. We're a little bit past due on this week on our podcast, but we have a bunch of new, exciting, and next level news headlines to discuss. And Kristen, I think the big story of the week that's drawn a lot of attention, we've had a handful over the past couple of weeks that we're going to get to, but I think the big one is the backlash to flock safety cameras. Those are the automated license plate readers that you're seeing popping up all over town. Well, they've been here for quite some time, but some people are just now noticing them. And you know, the way these things appeared in Reno is very curious, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But
people have really been flocking to this story.
A lot of likes, a lot of clicks, and a lot of angry comments, and then a lot of bootlicking comments saying, "I have nothing to hide." That means you just haven't been pulled over or tracked down or falsely arrested based on one of these cameras yet. These cameras are in the news all over the country for the way they operate, and mainly because a lot of police officers around the U.S. are getting arrested for searching the networked data that is captured by these cameras, and they're doing that in ways that are deemed illegal or violating police department policies, such as looking for ex-girlfriends or girlfriends or spouses to stalk. They've also been responsible for generating a lot of false leads for stolen vehicles and things like that. The Los Angeles Police Department recently let its contract with Flock expire because of so many problems that they were having. I believe last I read they are renegotiating that contract to make some changes. And we saw that in Sparks. We talked about that on the last podcast, or maybe 2 podcasts ago, about how Sparks is letting its contract with Flock expire so that they can move to Axon. A lot of people critical of this technology don't think Axon is any better, but the Sparks police chief says otherwise. He says they have better control of the data that is captured. Now, I think it's important to note that the way this technology works is essentially if you drive by one of these cameras, a snapshot of your vehicle is captured, and that can include everything from your license plate. Obviously, they are automated license plate readers, but also the physical description of your car and so on and so forth. And I think what people are really objecting to, Kristen, is that this data is captured, but then it's searchable by police all over the country. And I spoke with Dave Moss from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who works out of the University of Nevada, Reno, and they've been documenting how Flock is being abused all over the country for some time. In fact, when we first reported on the city of Reno approving the Flock safety contract in November 2024, we quoted Dave Moss in that story, and he was warning about how this data or this technology was prone to error, as technology is often, especially AI technology. And so he sounded the alarm. We reported the story and not much was said. Well, here we are a year and a half, coming up on 2 years later, and the backlash to this technology is growing. And in my most recent article on thisisreno.com, I talked about how what Dave Moss and the EFF have found is that there have been searches for immigration purposes in Sparks. We're not sure exactly where those came from, but that is something that Flock Safety says is not allowed, is to have this technology be used for immigration via ICE or Border Patrol. And there's speculation that the way that these federal agencies are getting around that is by having like U.S. Fish and Wildlife Police do searches instead of ICE.
Sure are a lot of poachers out there, I guess.
I want to play some clips because, I remember watching this meeting when this was approved back in 2024. And I went back and rewatched it not once, but twice. And I was alarmed by how little information the then chief of police for Reno, Catherine Nance, gave to the Reno City Council about this technology. She called it something like, what did she say when she mentioned it? She said that it gathers objective evidence and facts. She didn't let on. Oh, and she also called it really fun. She didn't let on that a random parish in Louisiana, their sheriff's department or police department could search all of this data. And sure enough, I went on the Flock Safety website and found that there are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of police agencies that have access to Reno's traffic data. So I'm going to play a little bit of clip from that meeting.
This package also comes with Flock Safety Surveillance System. This is a full deployment system. They do the installation, maintenance, power, and internet. It's infrastructure free. They handle everything. 24/7 data coverage. So we get all of the cameras and everything else. We get that information rolling in real time. And they can do real-time alerts. So if we have a car that's wanted, a missing person, we can put those alerts into the system and we will get those alert backs almost immediately before we need somebody to call in and say, hey, I saw this car here or there. This alert system will come directly to us. This surveillance system gathers objects, evidence, and facts. So we look at what we're getting from it. We're able to pull it back. We can alert police of wanted vehicles, like I said, and we're going to do over 40 cameras. 31 will be downtown and 10 will be along major thoroughfares coming into the city so that we're able to capture people that are moving about and where they're at. All these things go right back into that real-time information center. We're really moving forward in our technology to help as a force multiplier to make sure that our officers have every piece of technology that they need to help them deploy in a smarter way than we have before. Before we go, well, maybe this neighborhood's a problem, so we'll go over there. This type of information allows us to say, this is where the problem is happening. This particular intersection, this particular street, this neighborhood, whatever it is, really leads us into how we respond and deploy our resources into different areas. We partner with Sparks PD for the Real-Time Information Center. We're rolling that up. It's a great program. This is another piece of it. We're working on data sharing with our neighboring agencies so that we all have similar systems that speak to each other, so we all have access to each other's cameras. We all have access to the information obtained in there, and we're able to move forward with that very fast. We are able to develop suspect leads with built-in software. If we are looking for a specific vehicle, we can put that information in and it will track on the cameras where that vehicle has been, so we have a better chance of finding a license plate or identifying where maybe that vehicle lives or stays.
The other thing that happened was this was a $450,000 contract with ARPA funds or federal COVID relief funds that has paid for this Flock Safety contract. And very few council members asked any questions about it. I don't think they were aware of what this technology does. And quite frankly, neither was I at the time. But now that we have a lot more information, particularly in the last year or so, about Flock Safety and what those video cameras can do, I think most people, once they start digging into it, are pretty alarmed. One guy on YouTube, a pretty famous guy who's been talking a lot about Flock Safety, talked about how easily hacked they were. And he was able to demonstrate that he could essentially look at a live feed of one of these cameras that was aimed at a playground in a park.
Yeah,
not being for traffic.
I can see some positive use cases for this technology. I'm just thinking about like when an Amber Alert goes out, if you can catch that license plate of the person who's, kidnapped a child or something, great. Mm-hmm. But the cons of this use and the things that can go wrong, it seems so far outweigh any of the positives that you really have to question it. And as much as the city is in support of this, what I'd really be interested to see, and what I'm understanding is not available for public consumption, is how many arrests, how many fines or tickets have been issued as a result of these cameras. What has it permitted the police to do now that they were unable to do before? I mean, is there data backing up the use of these cameras to improve safety in the region?
I looked at that. There is very limited research-based evidence that flock safety actually reduces crime to date. There's some evidence, but there's not very good evidence about it. So that's problem number one. But, most recently when people started showing up to council, the Reno City Council, and criticizing this and demanding that the city cancel these contracts, Police Chief Corey Solferino told the council in May that Flock's automated license plate readers are the same license plate reader technology as used in the Bay Area to collect tolls on roads, those fast track cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what he said.
Is there anything in our budget this year titled Flock?
I do believe that we have some PTZs and LPRs that are affiliated with that.
I don't know what a PTZ or
Sorry,
an LPR
pan tilt
is.
zoom camera. I apologize to the entire council.
okay.
I'm a police officer for 27 years and I use acronyms. So
It's all right.
Flock uses a pan tilt zoom camera
Pan tilt
at
zoom.
strategic locations throughout the city and the county.
Okay.
And then there's also ALPRs, which is automated license plate reader.
Right.
The same technology that you would see in the Bay Area on any fast track lane that they use to capture toll fees.
Okay.
It's the exact same technology.
Right.
So as you can see, he said it's the exact same technology. And I looked into that, and I didn't look specifically at the actual cameras themselves. And maybe technically he might be correct. What he's not correct about is how those data are being stored and shared. I think the unique feature of Flock is that it allows these police departments around the country to search local Reno traffic data for immigration violators or whatever. And so I think that's really what a lot of people are alarmed about. And, the justification to these cameras is that it's not a Fourth Amendment violation because they're taking pictures in public of your vehicle as it drives by. Many, many vehicles, hundreds of times a day. And that is all public information. And theoretically, it's happening in public, so there's no expectation of privacy. What I would suggest in response to that, and a number of people brought this up at the last city council meeting, is how the mayor felt when a GPS tracker was placed on her car, which
I
at
was
the
just
time
thinking about that.
was legal.
Yeah. I mean, her car is traveling on city streets. So wherever it goes would theoretically be, public information. That's not a civil rights violation. She doesn't want to be tracked.
Imagine if we, let's say, developed a website that says, where's your council member? And every time they were cited in public, we put a little pin drop on there.
That'd be
What
awesome.
do you think the response to that would be? Probably a harassment claim. So the other, I think, criticism of this technology is how one-sided the access to information is. And Dave Moss, who I mentioned earlier, did a records request to Washoe County, City of Sparks, and City of Reno for the network audits of these cameras. And you can probably predict that the sheriff's office produced gibberish in response, according to Dave. The Sparks police produced the records, and I did ask the city attorney why they did so, and I will tell you the response. But the City of Reno said, nope, this is top secret confidential information because of a governor's order from January of 2020. I may have mentioned this on a last podcast. So it's fascinating to me that the City of Reno considers this information confidential and top secret to protect the so-called integrity of police and police investigations, whereas Sparks says, we didn't think there was a legal basis to deny the request.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure how Reno can stand behind that justification when, body cam footage is public record. Granted, they redact the backs of their heads, and their faces and everything pretty much having to do with their own personnel. But I mean, an image of a street versus body cam footage doesn't seem to be really that different. I mean, I'm no attorney, but I'm failing to see the difference here.
I will tell you, in a case where a person was filming police here locally, and I believe was arrested or threatened with arrest or maybe cited at one point, he sued as a pro se litigant. So he sued on behalf of himself with no legal representation, the Reno Police Department, for, I don't know what it was, harassment, Fourth Amendment violation or something. It was a couple years ago I reported this case. But when the city of Reno responded to this case, they tried to claim to the judge that by this guy putting his cell phone video of his encounters with the Reno Police Department, that he was violating the peace officer's Bill of Rights. They actually said that in federal court.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how the peace
That is
officer's Bill of
freaking-
Rights outweighs your constitutional protections.
The ability to film police and anyone in public is so well established. It's, I mean, this notion that you can't film ICE officers on the street that the Trump administration is trying to put forward is asinine. And so is the city of Reno's posture on this very issue too. So anyone listening out there, always film police encounters, because the ability of you to actually get that body cam footage later is going to be very questionable, let alone having that information or that footage unredacted, because they will claim that police officers have a statutory right to be anonymous on a street corner, I guess, to have their faces redacted from the video footage. So opposition rising to flock, I think it's well justified. We did rerun that editorial up after we ran our story. And what we wrote, Kristen, is that really, I think the city council was duped in this. And I think it really shows that city staff don't always meaningfully put forward information about some of the initiatives coming in front of the council. And B, the council members don't seem to have the wherewithal or the reasonable level of skepticism to ask basic questions about what they're actually approving. You want to switch gears to a happier topic?
Yeah, I mean, maybe
might have a happier ending at the end of this segue.
Maybe you just need a massage, Bob. But there soon, hopefully, will be fewer places for you to get a massage, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So last week, Reno City Council approved to move forward with researching and drafting a new updated ordinances. So there's no updated ordinance yet. We haven't seen any text or anything, but what they're looking at is updating the business licensing and other ordinances to better regulate illicit massage parlors. So this isn't, your like Massage Envy and your day spas. This is parlors.
I am familiar with one of these operations, Kristen, and I'm happy to explain how.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The This Is Reno headquarters during the pandemic was stationed under one of these places, and I didn't know what was going on until somebody came in, somebody we both know very well, and said, "Hey, you know about that place upstairs, don't you?" And I'm like, "I know they leave the doors open after hours, which is causing some problems for everybody else in the office suite." He's like, "Oh yeah, they're on Rub Maps." And I'm like, "What is Rub Maps?" And I'm like, "You know what? Don't tell me. I don't want to know." But it's actually kind of sad what's happening in these places.
Yeah. So
really
RPD wants to rub them out. But what RPD wants to do. So basically, I mean, in all seriousness, these illicit massage parlors are businesses that are taking advantage of people who have been trafficked. I think Chief Solferino said that there was like more than 80% of them were Asian. He said that this really kind of came to light when the HEAT team, which is the human exploitation and Trafficking Team, which is a unit comprised of multiple agencies in the area. When they really started working on some of these human trafficking cases, they found that there were quite a few of these massage parlors operating in the region. And it was people who had been trafficked here. Their passports are withheld. A lot of them are here, beyond any sort of legal stay. And they are basically being forced to pay off thousands of dollars in debt that their traffickers say is owed for their transport to the U.S. They are being held in, they're
Kind
being
of an
forced to
indentured
sleep.
servitude, right?
Yeah, essentially, yes. They're
With
being forced to sleep and live within the business, which is not appropriate, and working 12 to 16, 18-hour days. And so council members said, yeah, let's get rid of them. The city of Sparks already kind of jumped on this. They did some enforcement actions last year. They passed a new city ordinance, and based on the last reports from the city of Sparks, they closed down the last of those businesses there in that jurisdiction. So Chief Solferino is saying that in order for Reno to kind of participate in that, not just have all of those businesses in Sparks just shift to Reno, Reno needs to catch up, pass this ordinance so that they can then have this enforcement. And it would kind of combine the police action with business licensing and code enforcement. And so they would be able to kind of come at it with a three-pronged approach to put these people out of business and hopefully provide some services and support to the women who are being trafficked in these massage parlors.
Going back to the office suite above, where there was one of these places, I could kind of sense the desperation there, especially during the pandemic. They got red tagged. They got a sort of a pink notice placed on the door because they refused to shut down. That makes sense as to why. They probably couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very sad. And this should theoretically, if Sparks's model plays out for Reno, should help that situation and reduce some of the trafficking issues that come with these places.
Let's hope.
On a happier note, actually, no, not at all. Data centers, Kristen. We're back on data centers. Just today, we got word that NV Energy has sued a private data center developer, a couple companies called Reno Power and Tract. And the nature of the lawsuit boils down to a couple things, which is that the companies want a certain amount of power. I'm going to tell you how much here in a minute. It's going to blow your mind. And NV Energy is basically saying that the way you're asking for this amount of power is essentially you want the citizens of Nevada to pay for it. So here's what happened. So NV Energy filed a lawsuit. It was last week, and against the companies Reno Power and Tract. And they're basically saying that those two companies wanted a private arbitration over disputes in the amount of power they want to use. And NV Energy's response is that's not legally permissible. This really needs to be done through the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, these kind of conversations. So that is the thrust of the lawsuit. But the key component, and this is a direct quote from the lawsuit, is large load customers should bear the costs required to serve their projects and should not shift those costs onto Nevada families, small businesses, and other customers. How much power are we talking about? You ready for this?
It's so much.
I had to put this in the Google for Brains machine, and it is approximately just over 2 gigawatts or 2,000 megawatts. And it said that would power as many as anywhere from 200,000 up to maybe even more than that. 1 gigawatt could power roughly 200,000 to 1 million homes. And so 2 gigawatts would be 400,000 to 2 million homes. That was one estimate. Another was 1.6 million average Nevada residential customers. And that was based on the average Nevada residential consumption of about 930 kilowatts per month. and that was 2024 numbers. Approximately, these two data center projects would be comprising about 44% of all electricity sold at retail in Nevada in 2024, according to the estimates that I pulled.
And just for
Today.
comparison's sake, so the Keystone data center that everyone is upset about, that's a, what, 6 megawatt?
I don't recall.
I think it's about a max capacity.
They keep changing it.
I know they do. But, 6 megawatts or 12 megawatts is what people in Reno are upset about, and they have every right to be upset. But this company is looking at 2,000 megawatts.
So nearly half the amount of residential electrical usage that exists in the state right now for two facilities. That, by the way, earlier this year, were the opening of the groundbreaking of these two places was celebrated by Governor Joe Lombardo, people from the economic development groups, and the unions who seem to love data centers because of the amount of jobs that it brings. I just did another quick search, and 2 gigawatts can power about 1.7 million homes in Nevada, according to this other estimate. So I think those numbers are, roughly about the same. It's a lot, and essentially what NV Energy is saying is that an arbitrator cannot grant the relief that these two companies are seeking, and so they are asking the court to put an injunction on the request for this to go to arbitration. NV Energy has also submitted its 2026 Integrated Resource Plan to the PUCN, and they're asking for this request to go to arbitration be held in abeyance until that time, till that plan can be reviewed. So this is huge. It's a big deal. We will probably run the story today, so this will be out well before this podcast ever becomes public. But that's big news. I mean, it's really going to be a showdown. If a local judge does not rule in NV Energy's favor, I would predict this could get clogged up in the courts for the next few years, and these data centers may not be built, or at least completed, for quite some time. I think this has the makings of a Nevada Supreme Court opinion coming soon, maybe in a few years. It would be very awkward and very unpleasant for Nevada consumers if a judge decides that a data center developer can go straight to arbitration if they don't like NV Energy's requirements. And in this case, if what NV Energy is alleging is true, exactly what we feared several months ago about the people paying for these data centers could, in theory, become a reality.
Well, and what's frightening is that you have, elected officials in Story County that are approving these projects, and their impacts trickle out to residents across all the rest of the state who have no say in these approvals.
This could be decided by a judge, and it could be very unpleasant. I think is the short of it. We'll see what happens. We'll keep following the case. I've already got it in my monitoring system. I will say that I did reach out to Tract before running this story, and before discussing this, I have not yet heard back or received a reply. So when and if we get one, we will update it on the website. Shifting gears, speaking of the rest of the state and Northern Nevada that's being impacted by data centers, Kristen, you did some research the past couple of weeks, and you got a scoop.
Yeah. So, the past few weeks, we've seen quite a few stories published on fundraising in the election. We're heading towards the general, and July 1st or July 15th, the financial disclosures were due. So all of the campaign fundraising and campaign spending for the quarterly reports were due from those candidates. And so we've seen a lot of news stories about who's fundraising the most, which, great. People are raising money. We can all go to the Secretary of State's website. We can look up and see where they're getting their campaign donations from, where they're spending them. I think that that's really important. But I think one of the other things that's important is making sure that we understand definitely at the congressional level. I mean, I would love to see this at the state level as well, but disclosing where candidates are getting their income and how they're making their money. So David Flippo is running for
From Las Vegas.
David Flippo from Las Vegas is running for Congressional District 2, which is Mark Amadei's seat, he's retiring. So Flippo's running. He threw his hat into the ring, I think in April. But he already had a pot of money. I mean, not a huge pot of money, but he already had a pot of money because he's run for CD4 in the past, which I don't remember if that's Susie Lee's seat or Dina Titus's seat, but it's a Southern Nevada seat. It covers a part of Nye County, and it's not urban Las Vegas, but it's kind of that southern rural area of the state. He ran for that, didn't win. He also ran for state office in the legislature, didn't win that either. He lives in Las Vegas and is running for CD2. And as part of the requirements for running for Congress, the House requires that candidates who raise at least $5,000 and spend at least $5,000 submit a candidate financial disclosure. And this disclosure is intended to provide the public with information on where that person gets their money, where they have their investments, so they can evaluate whether they think that there's conflicts of interest with what that candidate is doing. And there's a searchable database on the House Clerk's website, and searching that database, Flippo has not filed that disclosure ever. He didn't file it when he ran for CD4. He has not filed it for when he ran for CD2 that I can see. And I can't see that he has filed for any sort of extension on that.
Who did file?
So Teresa Benitez Thompson did file. James Settlemeyer, who didn't even make it through the primary, filed. I believe Morgan Wadsworth, who also didn't make it through the primary, filed. So they all filed. And you can go back and see filings from many years past, and many candidates in Nevada's districts have filed. But Flippo has no records of any sort of filings in this. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this is that he loaned his campaign about $1.6 million. And so I think a lot of people are wondering, where does this $1.6 million come from that is funding his campaign? We don't know. We don't know. His business dealings are kind of opaque. He seems to be some sort of a financial advisor. And he has, based on state filings, he did file a disclosure from his run for state legislature with the Secretary of State. It doesn't indicate what his income is, but it does indicate that at the time, which is several years back now, that he had retirement income from military, he had disability income from military, and he had some income from owning a hobby town out of state. He owns an out-of-state business, and he also is some sort of financial advisor. But it doesn't indicate any sort of investments that he may have. It doesn't indicate, how much money he's bringing in. So it's really unclear where this 1.6 million came from, and how it factors into his campaign and his politics. I think that's a bit of a concern. And I think even more so than following the money is the fact that if this candidate can't even follow the House rules, how is he going to follow any sort of rules and be an honest official? I mean, just the lack of honesty and the lack of willingness to follow the rules, to me, is a huge red flag when it comes to an elected official. I just kind of, is he going to follow any sort of ethics rules? What kind of elected official would he be? So that's my own opinion, but I think it's I think voters should really be asking. And we did ask him. We sent a couple of emails to a couple of different email addresses to him and did not get a response as to why he hadn't filed those and whether or not he'd had any extensions. So he might have just been out campaigning in Las Vegas, where he seems to be based. He does have a Reno address on his documents, but it's a post office box at a Staples on Plum. So he doesn't really live in Northern Nevada.
Wait, the Staples on Plum has post office boxes?
It appears so.
Are you sure about that?
I don't know. I mean, that's
Is that
what
where
I'm
his address got tracked to?
Yes, the address on his filing got tracked to the Staples on Plum.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at his campaign filings that he filed for fundraising and expenses, his expenses are covering utilities for office space in Las Vegas. So his office space and his utilities are all based in Las Vegas. He's not even running his campaign necessarily his headquarters from Northern Nevada. And I think that's because he doesn't want to commit to Northern Nevada unless he actually wins.
I believe he has at least a rental residence here, doesn't he? I seem to recall reading that somewhere.
Nothing that's been paid for through the campaign. So those are the only finances that are available publicly because, again, he has not filed any sort of candidate financial disclosure.
So we don't know that.
We can see the challenges here with trying to understand this. And, some people would say, well, my finances are private, but we see so much happening with the finances of elected officials and how they're now using office to enrich themselves. And I think that it's really important to understand what a person's finances are. What he hasn't turned in is the candidate financial disclosure, which is an annual disclosure that identifies this is my employment and this is how I personally make money, not the campaign.
And you're right about that. East Plum Lane, I was not aware that Staples even offered P.O. boxes, but that is the address that he lists. It does say there was a report on Channel 4, however, that he did rent a residence in Skyline area of Reno. So he's renting. 6-month lease, year lease. Quote, I live here in Nevada. We're renting a house right now because we just recently moved up here. It takes a while to buy a home. So we want to find the right place when we purchase for sure. But right now we're renting. We have a great rental house and we're going to put roots here in Northern Nevada. That's the statement as of May 5th on a local news TV station thing. So,
all right.
Okay. Well, maybe they'll respond one of these days and file their proper disclosures.
Yeah.
If that's what they haven't been doing. Yeah. Well, good job looking into that. That's a lot of work to chase all that stuff down. The other really big story, Kristen, that we reported recently was the arrest, the details about the arrest into the murder of Anna Scott. Anna Scott was, as many of you know, was an Indigenous woman who was murdered in 2022, and they've been looking for the people responsible for a long time. I looked into this quite a bit, and the initial suspect was recently arrested, indicted, not arrested. They were actually already in prison. That was one of the things that we found out in this particular case. A gentleman by the name of Delshay Astor, who is a member of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. And so what happened essentially is there was a robbery that occurred in January of 2022. And within a few weeks after that is when Anna Scott was murdered. Delshay Astor was implicated in the robbery and is currently serving time in prison for that and has been since 2022. And it was recently revealed that he was a suspect in the murder of Anna Scott. Now, here's where it gets very interesting is the sheriff's office knew that he was a person of interest in this case pretty quickly after it occurred. But as you know, they've been very tight-lipped about releasing any information here. And I think this is one of those cases where had some information been released publicly, we could have perhaps, the public could have come forward. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody knew he was a suspect, or very few people did. And so we'll see what happens with that. But he is a suspect. And just today, in fact, we got a new press release saying that another arrest has been made in the case. And that individual's name is Joel Christie, arrested on federal charges of accessory after the fact and aiding and abetting. If you know what happened in this case, Anna Scott's body was found in a burning vehicle in Washoe Valley. It's a very heinous crime. And what basically happened was it had to have been more than one person, obviously, because how would somebody set a car ablaze and then just immediately disappear like that? So there had to have been somebody else involved. Well, I did a little bit of background information. Joel Christie was implicated in another situation with Delshay Astor back in, I believe, 2016 or 2017. Sorry, 2016. There was a robbery of two people at the GSR. And essentially what happened is Joel Christie and Astor both fled the scene at that time. And they were ultimately charged and convicted of robbery, conspiracy to commit robbery, and possession of stolen property. Very sad case, very sad developments. I guess positive developments in finally getting justice, but it's just a very sad case. And, the other thing I think it's important to mention about this case is that what's being challenged is the nature of it being, quote, Indian versus Indian, or Native versus Native crimes. And I guess that legally can change how these cases are adjudicated. The defense attorney for Delshay Astor is seeking to have the case dismissed, or, basically saying that the federal government doesn't have authority in this case to prosecute because it supposedly occurred in Indian country. There's a lot of other disputes in the case about the federal government not providing discovery materials, and what they have provided so far, at least according to the latest legal filings that I've read, do not even implicate Astor as being the main suspect. So there's a lot of battling going on behind the scenes about this case. I know it was in the hands of the Washoe County folks for quite some time, but ultimately the DA's office decided at some point, or maybe it was the feds, we don't really know, but the DA's office, their position is that the murder occurred in Indian country, and because Astor was a member of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, then that would have basically triggered the Federal Major Crimes Act in establishing jurisdiction. So that's being challenged at this point. I think more evidence needs to come forward before we know for sure, but it is going to be a very sad case. And, I think our hearts are with the family and Anna Scott's friends. And slowly information is coming out.
Yeah, it's good to see some development on that case and for her to get some justice. All right, we got to shift gears, Bob. This podcast has been a downer, but we've got some laughs. The gold and silver.
We got roasted for the gold and silver. I think I've explained this to people sort of quite a bit about how we do food and business features. They're not meant to be like, your food sucks, go away type things. My waiter was rude to me. They're meant to be sort of shining a light on small business. And in this case, maybe we fell short, I'm not sure, but Nora Tart's review of the gold and silver, which I thought was pretty good. I mean, it's pretty normal, review of what they're offering and the remodel and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think we underestimated the legacy and the lore that is the gold and silver.
And, the lore.
I don't know if I've ever stepped foot in this place, Kristen.
I have once. I appreciate that people hold the gold and silver, the former gold and silver, as it was dear to their hearts. I ate there once. It must have been like the mid 2000s, and I got violently ill. I vowed never to return. It made me so sick. I thought the entire experience was wholly unpleasant. And I would be first in line if the Little Nugget Diner reopened. I am not against dives. I am not against, a good greasy plate of fries, but the gold and silver was not all that it was cracked up to be. And you can hate me for saying that. I think our comment feed was a good chuckle on this story.
We should pull a Dave Letterman, do the top 5 comments we received in response to the gold and silver write-up.
Okay. You want to alternate?
Yeah, I'll start with and by the way, we need to mention that people hate the gold and silver now that it's owned by Jacobs Entertainment.
Yes. The gold and silver, I guess we should probably mention that is one of the properties that was acquired by Jacobs Entertainment and is part of, I guess, it's kind of near the entry to the
so-called neon line.
The so-called neon line district. Yes. So it's your gateway to the area.
Top five angry, disappointed, disgruntled comments about the gold and silver in response to This Is Reno. All right, number 5, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Last time I visited, the food was depressing. Not the people, the food.
All right, number 4. As soon as I saw Jacobs Entertainment, I stopped reading. We'll just leave it there.
Number 3, the only positive there is to show this place now is that Jacobs actually did something with the property they bought. However, sticking with their usual, they ruined it. I guess the roof hasn't leaked yet. LOL.
Number 2, incredibly disappointing. I think they want it to fail. I will remember the good old days and forever feel sorry for the waitress we had recently. I think she deserves a better run place. Wow.
That one feels more depressing than anything.
Oh, yeah.
Number 1, my favorite. It's an American diner, everybody. Relax. It's not a steakhouse.
The gold and silver.
I'm with you on the awful, by the way. The fries there were the bomb. But, frankly, even that wasn't enough of a draw to get me to downtown.
No.
And, I will tell you, I went to one of those, let's just say one of those places with local lore and legend and their famous burgers and whatnot recently, my wife and I, and it was super mediocre. I think, look at the Yelp reviews or the online reviews first and then go make your own judgment. But in general, I try to stick with 4-star places rated 4-star or above when I go to eat, which is not often. I don't try to eat. I mean, there's some places I eat at like almost every week, places that I really like to support. But by and large, going out to eat in Reno is not always a great deal. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. You remember when there were like 3-hour waits for P.F. Chang's?
Oh, yeah. P.F. Chang's when it first got here was great.
Crazy.
Remember the line around the block for the donut place, the Krispy Kreme?
Oh, the Krispy Kreme, yeah. Well, and I think people camped out on the sidewalk for Chick-fil-A. I don't know what it is with restaurants and dining in Reno, but it's a little crazy.
The Lear Theater gets a little brief update. You want to update us, Kristen? Or shall I do
so
that
the
one?
Lear Theater is... the city council voted to do this RFI process, request for interest, but they're doing another study first. They've done a couple of, I don't think I could ever work for the government because I could not deal with the number of studies that they have to do for basically everything. I'm just going to get up on my soapbox for a moment and mention that, the city says that they insist upon paying really high salaries to hire the best and the brightest and retain them. And yet these best and the brightest consistently need to hire consultants to do studies. Okay, hopping off my soapbox, the Lear Theater will get a feasibility study, and that is really, I think, kind of a follow-up to the historical structure report. So it'll cover some things that the historical structure report didn't cover, which is looking at the economic conditions, looking at different opportunities for redevelopment. There's going to be more stakeholder meetings. I think that's another way I couldn't work for the government, is I can't handle that many stakeholder meetings, for one thing. They're going to hear it. Everyone will get a chance to say again what they think the Lear Theater should be. And so this feasibility study is going to be happening. I think it's going to start in September and will continue on through like February. And then that will basically set kind of an even playing field for all of the organizations that want to submit interest. They'll have this feasibility study that will help them to develop a plan for what they think that they can do for the Lear Theater. Meanwhile, the city is spending some money from the redevelopment agency to freshen up the outside so it doesn't look so derelict, which they're going to fix the concrete on the steps. They're going to do some hand railings, more landscaping. They're going to hopefully finally get that wrought iron fence, the temporary wrought iron fence around it, so they can take down their chain link.
And color match the graffiti cover-up paint to the rest of the Lear. I'm still upset about that.
So that's going to be happening hopefully soon. And so that was city council. The other, another city council item was Mickey Huntsman, the city clerk.
Yeah. Real quick though, speaking of great comments, this was one about the Lear that I thought was fascinating. Somebody said they should sell it to Art Town.
All right. For people who are new here, Art Town had the Lear Theater. They did own it, and they sold it to the city for $1.
Plus there's still a bunch of fees. I think they pay every year back to Art Town for something on that deal.
Yes.
It was very strange.
People.
Yeah. Mickey Huntsman, the city clerk. Some of you may have noticed we reported that there was a move afoot. There was an HR complaint and supposedly investigation into her based on employee complaints, allegedly due to work not getting done or not showing up to work. We've heard that from several people. We don't have the details. People keep asking me, and we don't know yet. I'm not sure we ever will, but it was placed on the city council agenda last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what happened?
Yeah. So the city council voted not to even consider it. They basically, at the beginning of every city council meeting, if you don't attend or listen to those, they approve the agenda. And usually they approve the agenda with no changes. But this meeting, they approved the agenda with the removal of that item to consider firing her, and said they didn't even want to discuss it. And Mayor Sheevy said that she thought that it was important to let the investigation play out and see what it revealed before making any sort of employment decisions that would affect Huntsman and her job. And I think you pointed out, which is really interesting, that we have yet to see any final investigation details as to what happened with the Reno Police Department chief, former Chief Nance, and several of her executive officers, and they were fired. So
can we just at least attempt to be consistent about these things? So if you're going to do an investigation into your employees and then just fire them before the investigation is done or finished, why does the next person down the road not get the same treatment?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, due process is important.
Mickey Huntsman retains her job, but is still on paid administrative leave. and we'll see
For
how
reasons unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll keep following that one. Anytime a high-level city, a couple people have criticized us for even covering this. In fact, one city employee asked us to take the post down. What?
It's news. And, I think one of the reasons that it's news is that the city clerk obviously is the person who kind of manages the city council meeting records and that sort of thing. But they're also responsible for the city's public records. Their office is the office that takes in those public records requests and kind of handles those. And so in that sense, I think, yes, she's just a city employee, but that's a very important job within the city. And it's a position that is not, it doesn't have oversight from the city manager. The city clerk is actually hired and fired and reviewed by city council members. So in that sense, I think that is a very relevant story for us to be reporting.
Absolutely, since there's only two people that report to the council and mayor, and that's the police chief who didn't get due process, and then the city clerk who is going to get due process, because that's how we do things. I'm told by reliable sources that people are counting the days to when there's certain outgoing local politicians semi-related to this topic. But yeah, I think we should probably wrap it up. Anything else you want to add that we've missed? There's been a lot of stuff going on. And
I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on, but there's always going to be a lot of stuff going on. And we'll just be here reporting it.
Yeah, so stick with us at thisisreno.com. The only real way to stay on top of Reno news from us is to subscribe to our daily newsletter. It's just thisisreno.com/subscribe. You get our headlines that are published every morning, and that's the best way to stay informed. It's a free newsletter. For our paid stuff, we'll give you that pitch here in a second. But really, you can't find our stuff on social media all the time. It doesn't always populate due to algorithms. And, people always ask us, like, why don't you just put all your stuff out on social media like other people do? And I think there's a very good journalistic reason why, which is that when we do that, we no longer really own that content, and we certainly don't own those platforms. And there's been notorious cases of media publications just having their Facebook pages taken down, for example, and there's virtually no recourse for that. So it's absolutely vital for a news media outlet to maintain its own content on its own platforms. We need to tell everybody about our subscriber-only newsletter that goes out Friday afternoons. This is something that Kristen and I, we've won, and Darcy Harder, who does our newsletter editing, we've won a few awards for this newsletter. It's ad-free, and you get exclusive access to editorials that we publish only for our paying members. And in 2025, we won the Editorial of the Year award from the Nevada Press Association for the Urban Daily publications. And so that's a Friday newsletter, and you get our hot takes, you get our opinions on things, and it also features news briefs that we don't publish anywhere else. So head on over to thisisreno.com/subscribe. And thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.